state plans, and we did a brief introduction. Hi.
Sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
My name is Antoinette Cedillo-Lopez. I teach at law school.
We gave a very brief introduction to NPV with our lengthy introduction going on today, and we discussed the principles of a democratic society. So that's where we were, just to sort of hopefully that, gets your shake. Oh yeah, I remember that we talked about that. So we discovered the following in that process, that the statewide winner-take-all system is established by state law, not the U.S. Constitution. So you can do other things. You could have district votes, certainly as one way we've seen it in the past. So that means that each state has the power to choose their presidential electors in any manner they see fit. Thus, the states have the legal authority to change the current system. And several states actually for this election, and if we have time we'll talk about it at the end, several states are actually considering right now changing how they distribute their electoral college votes. Both Pennsylvania and Nebraska are considering, Pennsylvania moving to a district-based approach, and Nebraska changing back to a winner-take-all. So I think that's interesting for us to think about. Historically speaking, the Founding Fathers did not design the winner-take-all system per se, but it really evolved pretty quickly after the founding. And the statewide winner-take-all rule was used by only 3 states in the first presidential election, but quickly states realized that they had more power sort of as a state block than as the district block, and that their power was reduced by dividing the electoral votes when other states used the winner-take-all. So pretty soon everyone sort of jumped on the winner-take-all bandwagon. So today we want to introduce the concepts of compacts, because the national popular vote is based upon a compact between states in terms of how they will go about selecting their electoral electors. So we're going to present the national popular, and Jim is going to talk about compacts and the legal side of compacts. I'm going to present, well, Kim and I are going to present the NPV plan, and we're going to stop a lot to talk about process and what that will mean for changing how we elect our president, and have the process of how we would go about implementing a national popular vote in the state of New Mexico or any other state. Okay.
Alrighty. Alana, can I move this back without upsetting the apple cart here?
Yeah, you can, as long as you don't drop it on the floor. Okay. Yeah. It'll be okay.
I think there's a couple of things worth reiterating from our first meeting as well, and it follows what Alana has said here. And that is to refocus, make sure that we're recognizing that the way the Electoral College works right now is it's at a 3-tier legal process. We're looking at it from the standpoint of the United States Constitution. We're looking at it from the standpoint of federal statutory law, and we're also looking at it from the standpoint of state law. And as Alana already said, and as we talked about before, there's really, the federal Constitution and federal law, in many respects, gives the states the authority, requires the states, in effect, to determine how they're going to handle the awarding of electoral votes at the state level. Which one do I get here, Alana?
The arrow down? Down arrow?
Okay, so now we're shifting gears. We're not talking about the Electoral College right now. What we're talking about are compacts and what state compacts are. And they've been around longer than the United States Constitution has been. They appeared first in the Articles of Confederation way back when. And the Articles of Confederation were proposed in 1777. They were ratified in 1781, unlike the Constitution, which came around in 1785, 87, 89. I think it was fully ratified in 89, came about in 87. And in fact, the Continental Congress, before the Constitution existed, actually approved 4 interstate compacts under the Articles of Confederation. And there is one in particular that regulates navigation of Chesapeake Bay and Potomac River which was put in place in 1785 and was in existence and still operating until 1958. So it was very long-lived. And obviously compacts, interstate compacts, have been around for a very, very long time. The U.S. Constitution then also addresses compacts among the states, and it basically says, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, enter into any agreement or compact with another state. So the whole idea is that compacts exist, it's something that's important, it's usable, it serves a purpose, and the Constitution addressed that question. So what's the legal nature of interstate compacts? It's a contract. Very simple, it's a contract. That's what it is. It's an agreement by and between states. If you look at this particular case, it says very explicitly, a compact is, after all, a contract. So this is the U.S. Supreme Court laying out, this is how we're going to view compacts, this is the law, the common law that's going to apply to it. And then again, Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution supports and promotes the idea that contracts need to be protected under the highest law of the land. No state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts. So contracts are steeped in constitutional as well as statutory law. I'm not going to get into that. Legal nature of interstate compacts continue. Once a state enters into a compact, the state and its officials are bound by the terms of that compact. It binds the state legislature from passing laws that would impair that contract. And states can withdraw from compacts, but I'm probably in people's way, aren't I? But the only way to withdraw, once it's ratified, so to speak, within the state, is in accordance with the terms of what that compact says. States generally enter into interstate compacts in order to obtain some benefit that could only be obtained by cooperative and coordinated action with one or more other states. And I want to touch on that. Let me see it.
You went to the next slide.
Yeah, I wanted to. Thanks.
Sorry.
Good, it's working. Okay, so 1921 seemed to be a shift in how compacts were used. Before 1921, compacts mostly addressed boundary disputes among states, although the Chesapeake one was a little broader than that. It dealt with access and so forth within the bay. But something that's important about this, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, think about this in the context of boundary disputes. One of the things that we're going to see later on in some of these later slides is that compacts are, for all intents and purposes, contingent type agreements. Now there are different flavors of compacts, but generally speaking, they're a contingent type of agreement. And think about it in the context of a boundary dispute between states. If one state adopts a compact to say, New Mexico and Arizona, we're going to negotiate and agree on whatever the disputed boundary line is, and if New Mexico ratifies that, passes it, it's in state law, it is absolutely meaningless unless Arizona also passes the same thing. So from a compact standpoint, from a contract standpoint, compacts are contingent in many respects by their very nature. One state can join it or establish it, but unless another state has adopted it, it doesn't serve its purpose. It doesn't resolve the question or the problem that exists. Compacts, existing state agencies of compact states pre-1921 administer the compact. In more recent times, from 1921 forward, it gave rise to this idea that there's actually a governing body that is separate and apart from state agencies, state commissions, that sort of thing. And I think this is probably why this was considered a pivotal point in this process. It created this bi-state government entity, the Port Authority, which I'm sure everyone has probably heard of. And it's administered by its own governing body. The commission is appointed by governors from both states.
Jim, what do the terminations in these compacts traditionally look like?
The term, as in, how do they end? I think we're going to talk about is Kim going to get into termination in NPV compact?
In the,
I can't answer that question. I can't give you a generalization. What I can tell you is that some of these compacts have sunset provisions that say this thing's going to end after the objective that we needed to accomplish has been achieved. It can end. The others of them, and there's no constitutional restriction on their life. They can go on for as long as they're serving the purpose. And so termination is one of those things that's sort of dependent upon the objectives of the compact itself, whether it's meeting those objectives or whether things have dissolved and there's no more purpose for it. I'm trying to think about, for instance, the boundary dispute compacts. My suspicion is, although I haven't gone and researched this, is once a resolution has occurred on the boundary dispute that exists between the states, the compact theoretically is no longer necessary.
What
And
about
so-
this electoral college when this going around the 9 states or something?
Well, let's say that, I don't know, and I think Kim's going to touch on that, but the idea behind that is I don't envision there be any sort of sunset provision on that, right? Because it's going to move forward. States, if at some point enough states join and we reach that 270 point, then that's how the compact is going to award their electoral votes. They're going to award them based on who won the national popular vote, right? So if a state withdraws from that and they go below the 270, then the NPV compact is no longer a viable thing. That doesn't mean it no longer exists. Another state may join.
But you don't know what the termination clause in that compact says.
There's a withdrawal clause.
We'll get there.
Okay.
There's a withdrawal clause.
I mean, generally speaking, would you say these compacts are entered into legislatively, and then so the withdrawal process would be a similar process legislatively as well?
Yeah. I mean, there are some that, like, I'm going to touch on the, is it the Colorado, wait a second. See, some of them are established by Congress, like the Colorado River Compact, which New Mexico is a member of. But we were a member of it because Congress said, you're going to do this. So there are different ways that they're formed, but generally speaking, it's groups getting together and deciding we have a common problem that needs to be addressed. Let's try to, but we can't do it independent of each other. We need to do it with each other, and so they establish these compacts. I'm going to touch a little bit more on that. So, again, it's been broadened since, the boundary disputes of the earlier days of the country. As I said, there are no real restrictions on the issues that can be addressed by compacts, the problems that can be addressed. There are advisory compacts out there that simply get together and they research, they come up with reports, and they advise people on what direction things should go. Agricultural compacts, boundary compacts we've already talked about, civil defense compacts, which haven't been around really, or they started out in the 50s, I guess. Educational compacts, which are more of a national type effort, and energy compacts. And I think, Mr. Smoke, you're familiar with the Western Interstate Energy Compact. That's a compact that states got together and joined for a number of reasons. Economic, energy distribution, energy transmission, a whole range of things. It actually started out as the Western Interstate Nuclear Compact because there were issues with nuke at the time that it started. Fisheries compacts, which we started about, flood control compacts, those sorts of things. And in fact, the Western Interstate Energy Compact is governed by a board that's a multi-state board. Parties to interstate compacts early ones usually involve 2 states, and that's mainly because we're looking at boundary disputes. Right now what we're looking at is compacts that include 2 to 50 states and U.S. territories, D.C. In fact, this one right here, as you can see, it actually included 2 Canadian provinces, and I think the Western Energy compact also includes Canadian provinces. So they're